What's up, everyone? We just got a huge update today on the increase of the minimum wage here in Michigan. I made a video a few weeks back talking about a few bills in the Michigan legislature that were attempting to overturn a state Supreme Court ruling from a few years ago. That Supreme Court decision ruled that the minimum wage would be increased to nearly $13 per hour, and by 2028, it would be $14.97 per hour. Another key part of that Supreme Court ruling was that tipped worker minimum wage was set to increase to $5.99 per hour, and then by the year 2030, phased out completely. So there would be no tipped worker minimum wage. Every single worker in Michigan would make the regular minimum wage. And I thought that would have been a great change. Unfortunately, today, corporate lobbyists got their way again. They lobbied Michigan legislators on both sides of the aisle to sponsor a bill that got rid of the best parts of that Supreme Court ruling. The silver lining here is that this bill that Governor Whitmer just signed does have the minimum wage increasing to $15 per hour in 2 years, in 2027, which is great. It's one step closer to ensuring a livable minimum wage. I'm going to pull up an article that goes over the specifics of this bill, but first I want to point out that this bill maintains the tipped worker minimum wage, which I thought was a bad thing. The tipped worker minimum wage in Michigan was 38% of the regular minimum wage. So it was 38% of $10.56. But today, the minimum wage got increased, as well as the tipped worker minimum wage. It moved up to 50% instead of 38%. Don't get me wrong, this is progress. Increasing the minimum wage by $2 per hour does help people, but it's still not a livable wage. So we have work to do still. But let's get into the specifics. Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed bills Friday, rolling back a court-ordered boost to the minimum wage for workers who receive customer tips and a broad expansion of paid sick leave to almost all Michigan workers. The bills signed by Whitmer on Friday afternoon stop a phase-out of the lower tipped minimum wage and delay the implementation of paid sick leave requirements for some workers, while cutting the unpaid sick time benefits for workers at small businesses. Senate Bill 8, signed by Whitmer, gradually increases the tipped minimum wage from 38% to 50% of the regular minimum wage by 2031. I'm pretty disappointed that this bill got passed because the full implementation won't take place until 2031. It also doesn't phase out the tipped worker minimum wage like the initial court ruling did. So that part of the bill on Senate Bill 8 was pretty disappointing. However, the bill raises the minimum wage today from $10.56 to $12.48. So the minimum wage did get increased by about $2. And it's also set to increase to $15 per hour in 2027, which I think is great. Again, though, I feel like the tipped workers here in Michigan, so the bartenders, the wait staff, the other tip jobs here in Michigan, I feel like they got slapped in the face because their minimum wage is only being increased by like 35 or 40 cents, while the regular minimum wage has gone up about $2. So I don't think it's fair. The article says, Sam Inglet, executive director of progressive advocacy organization Progress Michigan, said in a statement, "It is disappointing that the Michigan legislature caved to a spin campaign pushed by corporate lobbyists and voted to roll back a well-deserved raise in paid sick leave for working families in Michigan." There was another bill that got passed that changed some of the paid sick leave time laws, but it's kind of complicated, and the information is still rolling out about what actually is going to happen, so I'm not going to get into that bill. So there you have it. The Michigan minimum wage, as of today, is now $12.48, and by 2027, will be $15. Like I said, this is great news. It's progress. It's not perfect, but it's progress. I don't believe that tipped workers should be making half of what regular workers make at minimum wage. I don't think it's fair. In a previous video, I unpacked this and gave a pretty strong argument as to why I believe this is the case, and I argue for why the tipped minimum wage should be phased out completely. The initial state Supreme Court ruling that would have phased out tipped minimum wage by 2030, I thought those changes would have made a positive impact on hundreds of thousands of Michiganders. Corporate lobbyists were able to use their power to ensure that our lawmakers watered down this ruling through several different bills. And this bill that just got signed does exactly that. And like I alluded to earlier, small progress is still progress in my mind. So although the minimum wage and the tipped worker minimum wage only is being increased by like a couple of dollars, I have hopes that the Michigan legislature will continue to increase the minimum wage and hopefully phase out the tipped minimum wage as the years go by. And that one day here in Michigan and across the US, we will have a livable minimum wage. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you next time.